Starving eagle refuses to leave nest. What rangers found inside left them speechless. In the heart of a remote forest, surrounded by towering evergreens and steep cliffs, a group of wildlife rangers set out on what they thought would be a routine patrol. It was late autumn, and the crisp air carried the faint scent of pine and damp earth. The forest was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant calls of birds preparing for winter. But as the rangers approached a clearing near a jagged cliffside, they noticed something unusual. High above, perched in a massive nest built into the crags of the cliff, was a bald eagle. Its feathers were dull and matted, its once majestic frame gaunt from hunger. The eagle barely moved, its piercing eyes scanning the horizon with a haunting intensity. It was clear to the rangers that the bird was starving, yet it refused to leave the nest. "What's keeping it there?" One of the rangers, Ethan, muttered, his binoculars trained on the nest. It could easily find food if it just left. The sight of a starving eagle staying in its nest was both perplexing and troubling. Bald eagles were powerful hunters, capable of soaring great distances to find food. Yet this one seemed rooted to its spot, as if guarding something invisible. The rangers decided to investigate, but the nest's location posed a significant challenge. Perched on a precarious ledge halfway up the cliff, the nest was nearly inaccessible without climbing gear. The team debated whether to intervene immediately or wait and observe the bird's behavior from a distance. Ultimately, concern for the eagle's health pushed them to act. They radioed for additional supplies and planned a climb for the following day. That night, Ethan couldn't shake the image of the eagle from his mind. Its sunken eyes and emaciated frame haunted him, but there was something else, something in the way the bird refused to abandon the nest. It wasn't desperation, he thought. It was resolve. What's so important up there, he wondered aloud. The next morning, equipped with ropes and harnesses, the rangers began their ascent. The climb was treacherous, the rock face slick with morning dew. Ethan led the way, his heart pounding as he neared the nest. When he finally pulled himself onto the ledge, what he saw made him freeze. Inside the nest, tucked beneath a layer of sticks and feathers, were two small, fragile eaglets. They were alive but weak, their tiny bodies barely moving. The mother eagle stood protectively over them, her eyes locking with Ethan's in a moment of silent understanding. "She's been staying to protect them," Ethan called down to the others, his voice breaking. "She's starving herself so they can live." The discovery sent a wave of emotion through the team. The mother eagle's sacrifice was extraordinary, a testament to the fierce and selfless bond between parent and offspring. But the situation was dire. Without immediate intervention, both the mother and her eaglets would perish. Ethan carefully placed the eaglets into a soft carrier, their small cries tugging at his heart. The mother eagle, though visibly distressed, didn't attack. Instead, she watched with a mixture of fear and trust, as if sensing that the rangers were there to help. Back at the ranger station, the team worked tirelessly to nurse the birds back to health. The eaglets were given a special diet to build their strength, while the mother eagle received fluids and nourishment to replenish her depleted body. Though she remained wary, she allowed the rangers to care for her, her maternal instincts overriding her fear. Over the following days, the rangers took turns monitoring the birds, their bond with the family growing stronger. Ethan, in particular, felt a deep connection to the mother eagle. Her resolve reminded him of his own mother, who had raised him alone while working multiple jobs to give him a better life. "She's a fighter," Ethan said one evening, watching as the mother eagle nuzzled her eaglets. "Just like my mom was." As the days turned into weeks, the eagle family began to recover. The eaglets grew stronger, their soft down replaced with sleek feathers. The mother regained her strength, her once dull eyes now sharp and alert. The rangers knew it wouldn't be long before they could release the family back into the wild. But as they prepared for that moment, another question lingered in their minds. What had driven the mother eagle to such an extreme? Eagles were known to abandon their nests if survival became impossible. Why had she stayed, risking her own life to save her young? The day of the release was fast approaching. The mother eagle, whom the rangers had started calling Aurora, had regained much of her strength. Her majestic wings, once limp and lifeless, now stretched powerfully as she perched in her temporary enclosure. Her eaglets, whom the team named Ember and Dawn, were learning to flap their small wings, their chirps echoing through the station. Despite the visible progress, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Aurora's story. Her decision to stay and starve rather than leave the nest defied the typical behavior of bald eagles. What had compelled her to risk everything for her eaglets? There had to be something the Rangers were missing. Ethan spent his nights poring over books and articles about eagle behavior, hoping to find a clue. He discovered that eagles were fiercely protective of their young, but they were also practical. If food was scarce or the nest was compromised, they would abandon it to ensure their own survival. Aurora's actions were an anomaly, a display of loyalty and sacrifice that went beyond instinct. His curiosity turned into a fixation. One evening, he approached his fellow Rangers with an idea. "I want to go back to the nest," Ethan said, his voice resolute. The room fell silent. One of the Rangers, a woman named Sarah, frowned. "Ethan, we've already rescued them. What more do you think we'll find?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "But something about this doesn't add up. Aurora was starving, yet she stayed. There's a reason, and I think it's still up there." The next morning, Ethan and Sarah set out for the cliffside, retracing their original climb. The wind was brisk, and the rocky ascent was as treacherous as before. When they reached the nest, Ethan carefully inspected the area, looking for anything that might explain Aurora's actions. At first, the nest seemed unremarkable, a sturdy construction of sticks and feathers, weathered by the elements. But as Ethan dug deeper, his fingers brushed against something unusual. Hidden beneath the nest's base was a shiny object, partially obscured by mud and debris. He pulled it out, his breath catching as he realized what it was: a small locket, tarnished but intact. Inside was a photograph of a woman holding an eagle feather, her smile radiant, and her eyes strikingly similar to Aurora's piercing gaze. Sarah leaned in, her eyes wide. "What is that doing here?" Ethan shook his head, his mind racing. The locket was clearly human-made, but how had it ended up in the eagle's nest? And more importantly, what connection did it have to Aurora? As they descended the cliff, Ethan's thoughts churned. The locket felt like a puzzle piece, one that hinted at a deeper story. Back at the station, he cleaned the locket carefully and studied the photo. The woman's expression was warm and full of life, her connection to the eagle feather almost reverent. Driven by a hunch, Ethan shared the photo with local historians and wildlife researchers, hoping someone might recognize the woman. Days later, he received a call that left him stunned. The woman in the photograph was identified as Dr. Margaret Hayes, a renowned ornithologist who had studied bald eagles in the very same forest decades earlier. She had been known for her groundbreaking work on eagle behavior, often spending months in the wild to observe their habits. But what caught Ethan's attention was the detail the caller mentioned next. Dr. Hayes rescued an injured eagle in this area about 20 years ago, the historian explained. She nursed it back to health and eventually released it. She believed the eagle remembered her. It would sometimes return to her cabin, bringing feathers or small objects as gifts. She called it Aurora. Ethan's breath caught. "You're saying this eagle might be the same Aurora?" "It's possible," the historian replied. "Eagles can live for decades, and their loyalty is unmatched. If this is Aurora, she may have passed that loyalty to her offspring." The revelation sent a wave of emotion through the team. If Aurora truly was the same eagle Dr. Hayes had rescued, then her actions were not just instinct. They were a continuation of the bond she had formed with humans years ago. Her refusal to abandon the nest was a reflection of that loyalty, a legacy of the trust she had learned from Dr. Hayes. Ethan shared the story with the Rangers, who were equally moved. Aurora wasn't just a mother protecting her young. She was a symbol of connection, resilience, and the enduring impact of compassion. As the day of the release arrived, the Rangers gathered at the edge of the forest, where a large crowd had assembled. Word of Aurora's story had spread, and people had come to witness the moment she and her eaglets would return to the wild. The locket, now polished and restored, hung around Ethan's neck, a tribute to Dr. Hayes and the bond she had formed with Aurora. When the enclosure was opened, Aurora hesitated for a moment, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon. Then, with a powerful sweep of her wings, she soared into the sky, her eaglets following close behind. The crowd erupted into cheers, but Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat as he watched the family disappear into the distance. "She's going home," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. As Aurora and her eaglets disappeared into the expanse of the forest, the Rangers and the gathered crowd stood in. For Ethan, the sight was bittersweet. Watching Aurora soar freely was a reminder of the resilience and strength she had displayed through her ordeal. Yet, it also marked the end of an extraordinary chapter, one that had connected human compassion with the instincts of a wild creature. The story of Aurora spread far beyond the small ranger station. News outlets covered her remarkable journey, from the selfless sacrifice she made for her eaglets to the rediscovery of her connection to Dr. Hayes. The locket became a symbol of hope, featured prominently in documentaries and museum exhibits that celebrated the unique bond between humans and wildlife. The sanctuary near the forest was renamed Aurora's Haven, dedicated to the protection and rehabilitation of raptors and other wild birds. A bronze statue of Aurora was erected at the sanctuary's entrance, depicting her in mid-flight, her wings stretched wide and powerful. Below the statue, an inscription read, "Aurora, a testament to resilience, loyalty, and the unbreakable connection between humans and nature." For Ethan, Aurora's story became deeply personal. He spent weeks reflecting on what her journey had taught him, not just about wildlife but about life itself. Aurora had faced impossible odds, yet she had persevered, driven by love and loyalty. Her actions reminded him of his own struggles and the sacrifices his mother had made for him. Ethan decided to honor Aurora by dedicating his career to wildlife preservation. He spearheaded programs aimed at educating the public about the importance of conservation, using Aurora's story as a centerpiece. During school visits and community talks, he would often hold up the locket and recount the tale of how a starving eagle defied the odds to protect her young. "This isn't just a story about an eagle," he would say. "It's about all of us. It's about the choices we make, the love we give, and the legacy we leave behind." Months after Aurora's release, a hiker spotted her near the forest's edge, perched on a high branch with her eaglets close by. The sighting brought tears to Ethan's eyes when he heard about it. Knowing she had not only survived but thrived brought him a sense of peace and fulfillment. "She's where she belongs," he said to Sarah, who became one of his closest confidants through the ordeal. And her story, it's out there now, touching people in ways we might never fully understand. Over the years, Aurora's tale continued to inspire. Researchers and conservationists referenced her story as a powerful example of the complex emotional and instinctual lives of animals. Donations poured into Aurora's Haven, allowing the sanctuary to expand its reach and save countless other creatures. One day, as Ethan walked through the sanctuary's grounds, he saw a group of children gathered near Aurora's statue. They were listening intently to a ranger recounting her story, their eyes wide with wonder. It was a moment that filled Ethan with hope. Aurora's legacy wasn't just about her survival. It was about fostering a deeper understanding of and respect for the natural world. Years later, Ethan retired, leaving behind a legacy of his own. On his last day at the sanctuary, he visited Aurora's statue one final time. He placed the locket at the base of the monument, a quiet tribute to the eagle and the woman who had saved her so many years ago. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "for showing us what love and loyalty look like. For teaching us that even the smallest actions can change everything." As he walked away, a gentle breeze stirred the trees, carrying the faint rustle of wings. Ethan paused, smiling to himself. Aurora's spirit was still there, watching, guiding, and inspiring a world that needed her lessons more than ever. Aurora's story became a timeless legend, a reminder of the extraordinary connections that can form between humans and animals. Her name became synonymous with resilience, loyalty, and the enduring power of love, a legacy that would continue to soar through the hearts and minds of all who heard her tale. And somewhere, high above the forest she called home, Aurora and her eaglet soared freely, a family united, a bond unbroken, and a legacy eternal. Decades after Aurora's release, her story remained etched in the hearts of people worldwide. The sanctuary, Aurora's Haven, had grown into one of the most respected wildlife conservation centers in the world. Its programs were credited with saving countless species, and its outreach inspired a new generation of conservationists. Aurora became a symbol for environmental education, her story shared in classrooms, documentaries, and even children's books. One such book, Aurora's Nest, became a beloved classic. Written by a young ranger who had been inspired by Ethan's work, it told the story of the eagle's courage and the power of love in protecting the vulnerable. The book featured hand-drawn illustrations of Aurora and her eaglets, and it ended with a heartfelt message. May we always protect the nests that nurture the next generation, as Aurora protected hers. Ethan, though long retired, was often invited to speak at events and conferences about Aurora's impact. He was in his 80s now, his hair silver, and his gait slower, but his voice carried the same passion it always had when he recounted Aurora's tale. At its core, Ethan said during one of his final speeches, Aurora's story isn't just about survival. It's about the choices we make in the face of adversity. She chose to stay, to sacrifice, to fight for her young. And because of that, she not only saved her family but inspired a movement. The crowd gave him a standing ovation, their applause echoing in the grand hall. Ethan looked out at the faces before him, knowing that Aurora's legacy was alive in every person who carried her story forward. One summer evening, long after the sanctuary had closed for the day, Ethan visited Aurora's statue for the last time. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over the sanctuary. He sat on a nearby bench, his heart filled with gratitude for the journey he had been a part of. As he sat in silence, a familiar figure approached, the current director of the sanctuary, a young woman named Lily, who had been mentored by Ethan years earlier. She carried a small envelope in her hands. "Ethan," she said softly, sitting beside him, "I thought you'd want to see this." Inside the envelope was a letter from a wildlife researcher in the region where Aurora had been released. It detailed a remarkable discovery, an eagle's nest high in the cliffs, occupied by a pair of young eaglets. Genetic testing confirmed what Ethan had long hoped but never dared to assume. The eaglets were descendants of Aurora. "She's still out there," Lily said, her voice tinged with awe. "Her legacy is alive." Ethan's eyes filled with tears as he gazed at the photograph enclosed with the letter. It showed a sleek, powerful eagle perched protectively over her nest, her eyes sharp and resolute. Though he couldn't be certain, he felt in his heart that it was Aurora herself, watching over yet another generation. The discovery reignited global interest in Aurora's story. The sanctuary hosted a special event to celebrate the continuation of her legacy, drawing visitors and supporters from across the world. Ethan, though frail, attended as an honored guest. As he stood before the crowd, his voice steady despite his age, he delivered one final message. "Aurora showed us what it means to fight for what matters." Her story is a reminder that even in the face of impossible odds, love and loyalty can prevail. And now, as her family continues to thrive, we have proof that her impact is eternal. Years later, after Ethan's passing, the sanctuary honored him by adding his name to Aurora's statue. The inscription was updated to read, "Aurora and Ethan, partners in legacy, guardians of love. May their story inspire generations." The sanctuary continued to thrive, its programs expanding to include global partnerships and initiatives to protect endangered species. Aurora's descendants became a beacon of hope, their presence a living testament to the resilience of nature and the enduring bonds between humans and wildlife. Somewhere, high above the forest, an eagle soared through the sky, her wings cutting through the air with effortless grace. Her cries echoed over the cliffs, a reminder of the courage, love, and loyalty that had defined her life. And in every heart that carried her story, Aurora lived on, a guardian of the wild, a symbol of hope and a legacy without end. Years after Aurora's sanctuary became a global symbol of conservation, her story evolved into a unifying narrative for environmental movements worldwide. The Aurora Initiative, launched by the sanctuary, spearheaded efforts to protect endangered species, restore habitats, and educate future generations about the importance of wildlife conservation. It became a beacon of hope for a world grappling with environmental challenges. The initiative didn't just focus on eagles. It expanded to include all species that face threats to their survival. Programs under the initiative worked tirelessly to reintroduce endangered birds, rehabilitate injured animals, and protect critical habitats from destruction. Aurora's name became synonymous with resilience and the fight for survival. One of the most remarkable outcomes of the Aurora Initiative was the Global Eagle Watch program. Inspired by Aurora's unwavering dedication to her young, the program encouraged communities to monitor and protect local eagle populations. Volunteers shared sightings, built artificial nesting sites, and worked to create safe environments for these majestic birds to thrive. One such volunteer was a young boy named Liam, who lived near the forest where Aurora's descendants were believed to reside. Fascinated by her story, Liam spent his afternoons observing eagles with his binoculars, meticulously documenting their behaviors. His dedication paid off when he discovered a new nest high in the cliffs, a nest that DNA tests confirmed belonged to Aurora's lineage. Liam's discovery reignited public interest in Aurora's family, sparking a wave of media coverage that brought renewed attention to conservation efforts. For Liam, it was a life-changing moment. He went on to pursue a career in wildlife biology, citing Aurora as his inspiration. "She taught me that every life matters," Liam said during an interview. "If one eagle can make this much of a difference, imagine what we can do together." Meanwhile, Aurora's story continued to inspire creative endeavors. Films, books, and even an opera were created to celebrate her life, and the profound bond she had shared with her human rescuers. A major motion picture, Aurora's Nest, became an international sensation, blending stunning cinematography with the emotional depth of her journey. The film's release brought her story to millions who had never heard it before, further solidifying her legacy. At the sanctuary, visitors left messages and tokens at the base of Aurora's statue, creating a living tribute to her impact. One day, a note written in a child's handwriting caught the attention of the staff. "Dear Aurora, thank you for saving your babies. I want to be like you and protect animals when I grow up. You're my hero. Love, Sophie." Ethan's name, now etched alongside Aurora's on her statue, became a touchstone for those who visited the sanctuary. His dedication to her legacy was remembered as a pivotal part of the movement she had inspired. People often said that the bond between Ethan and Aurora had transcended species, a partnership rooted in trust, love, and an unyielding commitment to protect life. The sanctuary established an annual Aurora and Ethan Day, celebrating their shared legacy. The event featured workshops, guest speakers, and a ceremony honoring individuals and organizations making a difference in conservation. One year, the award was given to a young scientist who had developed a groundbreaking technology to track and protect migratory birds, ensuring safer journeys for eagles and other species. Generations later, Aurora's sanctuary stood as a symbol of what humanity could achieve when love and compassion guided its actions. Her descendants continued to soar above the forest, their calls echoing across the cliffs where her story had begun. Scientists studying their behaviors noted a striking pattern. The eagles showed an unusual tendency to remain fiercely loyal to their nests, even under challenging conditions, a legacy, they believed, of Aurora's incredible sacrifice. One quiet evening, as the sun set over the sanctuary, a group of visitors gathered by Aurora's statue. Among them was an elderly Liam, now a renowned wildlife biologist, accompanied by his grandchildren. He pointed to the statue and began to tell the story of the eagle who had changed the world. "She was more than just a bird," Liam said, his voice filled with reverence. "She was a teacher, a protector, and a reminder that love knows no boundaries." As he spoke, an eagle soared overhead, its silhouette framed against the fiery hues of the setting sun. The group watched in silence, their hearts full, as the bird disappeared into the horizon, a living testament to Aurora's enduring spirit. And so, Aurora's story continued, carried on the wings of her descendants, and in the hearts of those who believed in her message. Her legacy was more than a memory. It was a movement, a guiding light for a world learning to care for the vulnerable and cherish the wild. Somewhere, in the quiet expanse of the sky, Aurora's spirit soared, eternal, unbroken, and infinite. Decades passed, but the sanctuary and the story of Aurora continued to thrive. The sanctuary became a cornerstone of global conservation efforts, expanding its reach to include international programs for habitat restoration, climate action, and endangered species recovery. Aurora's name was now synonymous with resilience, love, and the unyielding spirit of nature. In addition to Aurora and Ethan Day, the sanctuary launched the Wings of Hope Initiative, an annual event where conservationists, artists, and educators gathered to share innovations and stories inspired by Aurora's legacy. The initiative funded critical projects, including tracking technology for migratory birds, wildlife corridors in urban areas, and even rewilding programs to restore ecosystems. One year, during the Wings of Hope event, a breakthrough announcement electrified the audience. Scientists revealed that Aurora's descendants had formed a unique cluster of bald eagles that displayed behaviors rarely seen in the wild. These eagles exhibited extraordinary care for their nests and an unusual bond with their surroundings, showing loyalty to areas near the sanctuary even as they migrated. These behaviors suggest that Aurora's legacy isn't just symbolic, one scientist explained, it's genetic. Her story of loyalty and sacrifice lives on in her descendants, shaping how they interact with the world. The revelation added a new layer to Aurora's impact. Her story wasn't just an emotional narrative. It was a scientific marvel, a living example of how one individual's actions could ripple across generations. At the sanctuary, the next generation of leaders carried the torch. Among them was Sophie, the young girl who had once left a note at Aurora's statue. Now an accomplished conservationist, Sophie dedicated her career to studying eagle populations and advocating for their protection. During a ceremony at the sanctuary, Sophie spoke to a packed audience. "Aurora taught us that love and courage can overcome the greatest challenges," she said. Her story reminds us that every action, no matter how small, has the power to create lasting change. We owe it to her, and to the world to keep fighting for a future where all life can thrive. Her words resonated deeply, and the audience rose in applause, their collective energy a testament to the enduring power of Aurora's legacy. As technology advanced, Aurora's story became even more accessible. Virtual reality experiences allowed people to step into the forest where she had nested, witnessing her journey from starvation to triumph. Interactive exhibits let visitors follow the migration paths of her descendants, creating a tangible connection between humans and wildlife. One such visitor was a young boy named Max, who had been struggling with anxiety and a sense of purpose. Immersed in the virtual world of Aurora's journey, he felt a spark of inspiration he hadn't known was possible. After the experience, Max turned to his mother and said, "I want to help protect animals, just like Aurora." Years later, Max became a leading voice in global conservation, often crediting Aurora for igniting his passion. "She showed me that even the smallest lives can make the biggest difference," he said in an interview. Aurora's story isn't just history, it's a guide for the future. One day, researchers discovered something extraordinary: an eagle's nest high in the cliffs of a distant forest, far from the sanctuary but unmistakably linked to Aurora's lineage. The nest was larger than most, intricately constructed with feathers, twigs, and amazingly, another human-made object, a small metal charm shaped like a feather. The charm was traced back to a group of hikers who had visited the sanctuary years earlier. They had left it near Aurora's statue as a tribute, never imagining it would find its way into one of her descendants' nests. The discovery was heralded as a profound example of the interconnectedness of life, a symbol of how Aurora's story continued to bridge the gap between humans and nature. In the twilight of her life, Sophie returned to the sanctuary, now a sprawling haven for wildlife and a beacon of hope for conservationists worldwide. She stood before Aurora's statue, reflecting on the journey that had brought her there. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the sanctuary, Sophie whispered, "Thank you, Aurora, for everything. Your story will never fade." A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, and for a moment, Sophie felt a presence, a quiet, steady reminder of the eagle who had changed the world. Aurora's legacy endured, woven into the fabric of human and natural history. Her story inspired generations to act with courage, compassion, and commitment to protecting the vulnerable. And somewhere in the vast expanse of the sky, her spirit soared, eternal, unbroken, and infinite. Decades after Aurora's sanctuary became a global beacon, the unthinkable happened. A series of unprecedented wildfires swept through the forests surrounding the sanctuary. Sparked by a combination of extreme heat and human negligence, the fires spread rapidly, consuming everything in their path. The sanctuary, once a haven for wildlife, was now under imminent threat. Sophie, now the sanctuary's director, received a devastating call late one night. Flames were advancing toward the sanctuary, and evacuation protocols were underway. Staff and volunteers scrambled to relocate the animals, their hearts heavy with the fear that their beloved refuge might not survive. Amid the chaos, Sophie found herself standing before Aurora's statue, her hands trembling as she dialed emergency contacts. The fire's glow lit up the night sky, a haunting reminder of how fragile everything they had built truly was. The community rallied together, with firefighters, volunteers, and wildlife rescuers working tirelessly to contain the blaze and save the animals. Helicopters dropped water on the advancing flames, while teams on the ground guided frightened creatures to safety. But as the fire drew closer, Sophie faced a heart-wrenching decision. The sanctuary's archives, a treasure trove of documents, artifacts, and data tied to Aurora's legacy, were housed in a small building dangerously close to the fire line. If the flames reached it, decades of work and history would be lost. "We have to protect it," Sophie said, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. "It's too dangerous," one of the firefighters warned. "We need to focus on the animals and the people." But Sophie refused to give up. With a small team of volunteers, she raced against time to save what they could, grabbing artifacts and files while smoke filled the air. Among the items they saved was Aurora's locket, the tiny relic that had sparked so much wonder and connection. Sophie clutched it tightly, her heart pounding as they retreated to safety just as the fire engulfed the building. For days, the fire raged, testing the resolve of everyone involved. News of the sanctuary's plight spread worldwide, and donations poured in to support the rescue efforts. People who had been inspired by Aurora's story shared messages of hope and determination, reminding Sophie and her team that they were not alone. Then, in a dramatic turn of events, a storm rolled in, bringing heavy rain that finally subdued the flames. The fire was extinguished, But the aftermath was devastating. Much of the surrounding forest had been reduced to ash, and parts of the sanctuary were damaged beyond recognition. As Sophie walked through the charred remains of the sanctuary, her heart ached at the loss. But amid the devastation, a miracle unfolded. Many of the animals had survived, thanks to the tireless efforts of the staff and volunteers. And though much of the forest was gone, a single tree near Aurora's statue remained standing, a towering pine with a massive eagle's nest nestled in its branches. Sophie's breath caught as she spotted the silhouette of an eagle perched on the nest. It wasn't just any eagle. It was one of Aurora's descendants, watching over the sanctuary as if carrying on her legacy. The sight filled Sophie with a renewed sense of purpose. "She's still with us," Sophie whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Her spirit is still here." The community rallied once more, this time to rebuild. Inspired by the survival of Aurora's lineage and the sanctuary's enduring mission, people from around the world contributed their time, resources, and expertise. The sanctuary rose from the ashes, stronger than before, with new facilities designed to withstand future disasters. Aurora's story, already legendary, took on new meaning in the face of this challenge. She became a symbol not only of resilience and love, but of renewal. The idea that even in the face of destruction, life could find a way to endure. Months after the fires, the sanctuary stood transformed. What had once been a place of ash and loss now blossomed with renewed life. New trees were being planted, wildlife habitats rebuilt, and the spirit of the sanctuary rekindled by the unwavering dedication of its supporters. The community's efforts had turned tragedy into hope, inspired by the resilience embodied by Aurora and her descendants. Sophie, standing beneath the towering pine that had survived the blaze, marveled at the strength of the land and the creatures who called it home. Above her, the eagle nest remained intact, a living testament to Aurora's legacy. She watched as one of Aurora's descendants soared across the sky, its cries echoing through the rebuilt sanctuary. On the anniversary of the fire, a global event was held at the sanctuary. People from all walks of life gathered to honor Aurora's legacy and the resilience of the sanctuary. The event featured speeches, music, and a tribute to the firefighters and volunteers who had fought to save the haven. Sophie stood before the crowd, holding Aurora's locket in her hands. Her voice trembled as she spoke, the weight of the past year etched into her words. "When the fire came, I thought we had lost everything," she began. "But what I've learned is that legacy isn't something that can be destroyed. It's something that lives on in every action we take, every life we touch, and every story we tell." She paused, looking up at the eagle circling above. Aurora taught us what it means to fight for what matters. And now, as we rebuild, we honor her not by clinging to the past, but by creating a future worthy of her story. The highlight of the evening came when the sanctuary unveiled a new memorial. It featured a towering sculpture of an eagle rising from flames, its wings outstretched as if carrying the weight of the world. Beneath the sculpture, an inscription read, "In honor of Aurora, a symbol of resilience, renewal, and the unbreakable bond between life and love. From ashes we rise." As the crowd gathered around the memorial, a hush fell over them. Sophie stepped forward and placed Aurora's locket at the base of the sculpture, a quiet act of remembrance and gratitude. The gesture brought tears to many eyes, a reminder of the deep connection that had driven the sanctuary's mission from the beginning. In the years that followed, Aurora's sanctuary became a beacon of renewal and hope. Programs expanded to include wildfire prevention and habitat restoration, ensuring that no tragedy of this magnitude would occur again. Aurora's story was shared in schools, documentaries, and art, inspiring generations to protect the natural world and nurture the bonds that connect all living things. Sophie often visited the pine tree that had survived the fire, finding solace in the sight of Aurora's descendants nesting high above. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she sat beneath the tree and closed her eyes. "Thank you, Aurora," she whispered, "for showing us how to rise." Far above, an eagle soared, its shadow cutting across the golden sky. It carried with it the legacy of a mother who had defied the odds, the people who had fought to preserve her story, and the generations who would carry her spirit forward. Aurora's story wasn't just a memory. It was a movement, a guiding light for a world learning to embrace resilience and renewal. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of the universe, Aurora's spirit lingered, eternal, unbroken, and infinite.